What is your position on reducing the high cost of living as it relates to rents and property taxes in Hoboken?
I think being more efficient. We need to be more efficient with our own services in the city of Hoboken, right? I think there's just in our most recent budget that passed, Councilman President Zano and I presented a budget that had a little more cuts within our budget that just really got rid of inefficiencies within the city. So if we get rid of those inefficiencies, we think we could make those necessary investments. We want to see public safety. That's an investment we make in our town. Our library is an investment we make in our town. Paving our roads is an investment we're making in our city. Making sure we have our schools are funded is an investment we're making in our city. So we want people to make those investments in our city, but we want to make sure those dollars are going a long way and making sure that we're being good stewards of your dollars. So there's certain things that we're not utilizing in the city of Hoboken right now that we probably can cut. Certain programs that aren't being utilized right now. So we can save some tax dollars there because if we raise property tax, it also affects renters. So I want renters at home thinking it doesn't affect them as well. That I'm okay. That the pass through that landlords can pass to you. So we have to be real stewards on everyone's tax dollars and make sure their rents. But ultimately, we want to make the right investment for everyone. Make sure that they're protected. Make sure our streets are safe. Make sure our parks are secure and maintained properly. So we want to make sure our quality of life is enhanced through those tax dollars. So definitely going line item by line item, making sure we're doing everything efficiently and properly as best we can, and making sure that every employee that we do have in the city of Hoboken is working on the behalf of the residents.
So we just passed our budget and tried to do a great job about keeping our tax increases modest. Hoboken actually continues to have the lowest tax rate in all of Hudson County, which is something that's, I think, really significant in this environment because costs are continuing to go up. It's something that I'm going to continue to try and be responsible about because I know that's one of those things at the dinner table at the end of the day that you're always worried about, how you can address your costs in any number of ways. So I try to be thoughtful about that. Thinking about the cost of living and the affordability of rents, fighting for rent control was something last year that was on the ballot in November. And it was really important to me that we continue to protect our renters in this community. So I was really pleased to see the outcome of that referendum, that it was defeated pretty soundly on 2-to-1 margin to continue to protect our rent control universe. Rent controlled units are part of the picture when it comes to affordability. It is not the only way to address that. And so I think we should be thinking about whether there's adjustments that need to be made when we are building new developments. Right now, there's a 10% set aside for affordable units every time there is a large building that's constructed. Something that we'd considered in the stock of affordable housing in this community. So I'm hopeful that there's an opportunity to revisit those conversations and to frankly just continue to protect our renters. I know that in this landscape, corporate landlords have been using this algorithm software. It's something that was in the news because Hoboken actually passed a resolution to ban the use of this algorithmic software that kind of creates collusion in the market, essentially, because with some of these very large corporate landlords, they basically can just every day calculate based on property value and have a justification to keep increasing people's rents. And it's been really frustrating for renters to feel like out of the blue, they're suddenly getting hit with 20, 25, 30% increases. So that's something that I think was important, a message for us to send. The state is continuing to pursue a ban of that. And then looking at if there's ways for us to also support that community through investments like the tenant advocate. An idea that I have how we move forward is not just to have the tenant advocate, but actually to expand that universe to provide more legal resources to residents who are renters, because whether it's your rent that's being increased egregiously, or if it's that you're trying to be pushed out of something and under circumstances that are suspect, I just want to make sure that people feel like they have somewhere that they can go without having to necessarily afford a private attorney to defend themselves. So those are things that I think we can continue to support to make sure that that community feels safe.
I mean, the thing that's most directly within our control is property taxes. And I hear it. We hear, affordability is every single room that we're in, every room. We're hearing affordability concerns, whether it's, young people that have just moved here and, their rents are going up 15%, 20% because they live in a building that's not under rent control, or a senior who's lived here their whole life and they may be sitting on a piece of property that has a lot of value, but they can no longer pay their taxes. And they don't have the ability to source income to pay their taxes and will have to move. We have people that have been in rent controlled apartments for a very long time that just have, landlords that are really doing everything they can to be disruptive and push them out. Mm-hmm. So, again, as I mentioned, earlier, affordability is, because of the market, the kind of market pressures in Hoboken, affordability is really the topic where the government can step in and do more. We need to build more affordable housing, which we are. We have about 6,000 residential units that are approved or about to be approved, with 700 affordable units as part of that. And they're just in the process of being built, and they'll all be built in the next probably 7 years. So we'll start seeing more of it rolling online. But we still have some developments that haven't been approved that we really need to kind of be more thoughtful about having, like middle income type affordability units, addressing people that are more in like the middle income range. We need to enforce rent control, and we just need to reduce spending, and we need to spend better and spend more wisely. And there's a lot of low hanging fruit around that I think we'll be able to achieve some savings. But I'm not going to lie, the next couple of years from a tax standpoint are going to be really difficult. We bought a lot of things on credit cards. We bought really big shiny parks and big infrastructure projects that, our mayor, when he was running the city like a campaign, like promised all these great shiny things to show that he did all these great things. And now it's a really big tab, and now we have to pay for it, and we have to figure out how to pay for that.
Great.
Yeah, so this is multiple issues here, right? So this is not only a rent issue, but this is also a tax issue for me. Right? So I am the only candidate who's running for mayor who is a tenant. I rent. I live with the same fear that every single one of those other tenants live with. Right? And some of my opponents, they will actually try to shame me for the fact that I am a tenant, or that I'm a working class father of four. Right? I live those same fears. Mm-hmm. I have lived through all of that, and I will continue to live through that. But at the end of the day, we can change this. We can make sure that we build units for the middle class. We build units for those on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. And as you know, we have enough units in the city of Hoboken that really are on the upper end of the socioeconomic scale. So we have this continuum of the scale that we need to house everybody from point A to point Z and everyone in between. So I think there's a plan when it comes to housing that we can implement so that we do that. And that's really probably the biggest fear. On the other side of that question is the taxes. Mm-hmm. We need to reduce our taxes. You cannot pretend to be an advocate for the taxpayer and continue to vote for tax increases in the city of Hoboken. It is absolutely insane to me that we have people who continue to try to play the advocate for the taxpayer and then vote for a tax increase. That's nuts.
Let me separate this question to property taxes and then rents. Let's start with property taxes. Property taxes go up for a simple reason. The city hall spends too much, and it does. It spends on three things that really bother me. First of all, very generous labor contracts without thinking about how they're going to pay for it. Tax breaks to developers. Anytime you give somebody a tax break, you're increasing tax on somebody else because the money has to come from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And absolutely no regard to these costs like healthcare and pension, especially healthcare. City is what's called self-insured, as in any time somebody who works in the city hall, police, fire, goes to see a provider, that provider then charges the city and city pays. So what ends up happening is all these hospitals in New York City have figured out this is a great way to make money. Have you seen how many advertisements we get from Sloan Kettering and Special Surgery Center? And that's because, they know nobody's paying attention in Hoboken on healthcare costs. So they can charge 3 times more for a commodity surgery like knee replacement or hip replacement. So those are things I would do to bring down the taxes. I'm not even saying keeping them stable. You can bring down the taxes. On rent, the problem is, especially with the luxury buildings, the large luxury buildings, all of the negotiating power is with the landlords, the people who manage. Mm-hmm. They can send an email saying rent goes up 15%. What are you going to do? One of the things that's a problem is because you as a renter has to come up with broker fee and to find another place, and then security deposit. You say, I need to have this much cash to be able to move from this place to another place.
Right.
In most of the nation, except for Boston, it's the landlord who's responsible for broker fee. It's the landlord who's choosing the broker, and so it makes total sense that they pay the broker. When you do that, now you're shifting the negotiating power towards the renter and away from the landlord, because landlord will say, if this guy leaves because I'm raising his or her rent, then I now have to come up with funds to pay the broker. So simple things like that. There's one more thing I want to say then. When a new development goes up, mayor has a chance to agree to a financial agreement. This is an agreement where the mayor says, you must have these many parking spots. Right. These can only be 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom units, all of those things. In there is an opportunity to put some guardrails on rent increases. You can say 5% over inflation, no more than that. You can say, if you're going to be increasing rents by double digit, you have to give them 8-month notice, or something that actually brings power back to the renter, away from the landlord. Those opportunities have been missed in the past. And, if I were the mayor, I would definitely implement those.
What policies would you implement to ensure more affordable housing options for working families?
Well, I think that's something that we've always advocated for a number of years now. I think the last real affordable housing we had was 11th and Adams Street, 11th and Jefferson Street, which is going back since a night before I was even elected on the city council. But we saw it through on our end. So we look at Garage B, for example, have workforce and affordable housing within that project. So making sure that those, we have a 10-20% set aside right now in any of our redevelopment plans. Redoing the Hoboken Housing Authority project, which is something that's near and dear to me. It's something that, if we're having an honest conversation, I was elected on focusing on the housing authority residents and making sure that their quality of life was enhanced, that the buildings they were living in were improved upon. And while we've done a lot, we even mentioned community development block grants to get new roofs, new boiler systems. But overall, if you're walking into the buildings, they're not up to standard. And so we really want to focus on our housing authority redevelopment plan, make sure that happens, working with our Second Harrison Street site in partnership with the housing authority, making sure that's a senior center potentially to move residents that are living within the housing authority complex themselves. There's not enough senior housing in town, so we could provide that opportunity on Second and Harrison while we're growing out the rest of the housing authority, building it out in a way that's not displacing anyone within our city. That's providing that additional workforce housing. We talk about workforce housing, we talk about our teachers that work in our private and public schools in town. We're talking about the people that are cleaning our streets, right? They're working within City Hall. The people that are working in our library, the people that are working in our hospital here in town. We want to create those opportunities because it's almost like, kind of like Sesame Street. The people that I meet each day, right? I was walking down the street. I know John, I know Pam, I know Jim, I know Santiago, I know these people. They're working on our streets, and I think nothing made me more excited when I was like a second grader and going to Food Town to see Miss Crotto, my second grade teacher. I think we want to have more of those opportunities within the city of Hoboken and create that community feel that we may have lost over the last couple of years, to making sure that everyone has an opportunity to live, work, and feel and enjoy our quality of life that we have here. But that starts with bringing that community back. So I know that person that's living in our town, that's working on behalf of our city and looking out for them.
Oh, so, I think we have to look at the ability to use development and build not just market rate units, but also workforce housing. And this is something that was discussed as part of the Garage B proposal recently. That was something that I think is a really important project. It's basically taking the approach of transit-oriented development. That's something that's been happening in a number of communities, like in Morristown, where you're basically trying to co-locate residential units close to transit points in the hopes of really addressing people who are working families. And so we actually applied that concept, but to Garage B in Hoboken, and looking at whether we can move forward. It's kind of in the stages of development. We haven't seen a specific proposal yet, and they're negotiating this. But the idea of that building was, because it's city owned, we have the opportunity to create a footprint of residential units that would be all workforce housing, not necessarily market rate. And thinking about that is an incredible project, especially of the scale. It would also include refurbishing refurbishing the parking garage that's there, because unfortunately that parking garage is kind of at the end of its usable life. So it's something we would have to be doing anyways. We would have to refurbish that garage in some way. So in a universe where we have 1 square mile and we have limited space to work with, why wouldn't we be thinking about how to use those spaces more efficiently? So I'm really excited that that's a project that seems to be on the right track to moving forward, to see how that can develop. Buildings like Marine View that were always sort of positioned as homes that could be for, affordable homes for families, whether you're in public safety, whether you're a teacher, whether a union member, supporting those options in this environment is really important, because the private market unfortunately has had these egregious egregious rent hikes associated with them.
I think I think it's trying to expand the component of development projects to have an add-on for affordable units for, like I said, kind of more of the moderate price. We are. We currently have between 10 and 20% in most buildings. I would like to see that go, and I've supported in the past having that increase to 15%, and it could go as high as 20 in every new project. We don't have a lot of new projects left to do that in, but we have the ability to expand that. I think we need to do that, and I do think that within that expansion that we need to have at least a component of that be this moderate income. And the reason why it's only a component is there's actual kind of state laws that require us to build the very low to low income behind it and expand the percentage on new projects.
Yeah, this is the one where we get to utilize city-owned assets. If you look at Garage B, this has been a plan of mine for years. I've worked with the current administration to really talk about how we could do this. If you look at the property on Willow, where we're building the first senior housing in decades, these are things that I think we get to do when it comes to building new housing. And it's across that spectrum. I'm the only candidate in this race that's talking about building housing for homeless. I'm the only candidate talking about building housing for veterans. I am one of the few candidates that are putting my money where my mouth is when it comes to building affordable workforce housing, not only for municipal employees, but the barista who serves you coffee in the morning, or the server who serves you at dinner when you go out with your friends, or the busboy who cleans up that table, right? I'm talking about housing every single person who has the ability not only to work here, but now give them the ability to live here. On that same note, those that will build these properties, those union members, those working class guys and gals, they have that same opportunity, making sure that we house our union representatives in the city of Hoboken, whether that's local unions working in City Hall, whether that's the police department or fire department, our local teachers, or our carpenters and our operating engineers, all of them. They should all have that same opportunity. And I have a very clear plan to make sure that that happens.
So what's happening in our city is we are focused on subsidized housing, and then we have very affluent people who don't care where the taxes are. Building affordable housing is very different than keeping housing affordable. Mm-hmm. Building affordable housing is you're just subsidizing housing. Keeping housing affordable means you are reducing property taxes, you're keeping a cap on rents. So people who are in the middle, who have these regular jobs, they go to the city, their girlfriend, their spouse goes to the city, they have 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 in household income. It's protecting those people. Mm-hmm. To make sure that they can afford to continue to pay rent. In terms of building affordable housing, studies have shown over and over again the best way to help those working families who are below 80% of average median income is to have developers incorporate some rent control, some affordable units within their large development. I think my father was a factory worker. I got such wonderful opportunities in life because where we lived was in the middle of all the rich kids. So I got to see how they dressed and how they spoke and what movies they watched. In fact, I learned English just by watching them speak English because I didn't have access to a school that taught English. It can do amazing thing for a child to see the opportunity in front of them. And we should be able to do that by making developers secure certain number of units for such families who cannot otherwise afford to live there.